Hi everyone, welcome to part 3. Okay, my opponent has just played knight f8 and he's left a c-pawn here to be taken. But taking this pawn, although it would give me a strong rook on the 7th rank, would be bad now because he would get immediate counterplay with knight g6. Let's have a look. If rook takes c7, knight g6, and due to the mate threat on g2 here, if I'm not careful, I would lose my pawn on f3 and my position would be looking shaky. I have to play king h1 now, of course, to defend knight h4 coming next, and then queen g2 is just going to be mate. But next comes knight h4, forcing rook g1 to defend the mate. Now knight takes f3, and rook g2 because of the mate threat on h2. And now black is getting good activity with either knight takes e4 or bishop d8. And as I mentioned earlier, I like to try and keep my opponent's active play to a minimum, so I declined the pawn and played instead the immediate king h1. And oops, hold on now. After knight f8 was his last move, I played king h1 immediately instead of rook takes c7. And Fritz agrees this is the best move, preparing rook g1, and again gives me a small edge overall in the position. Knight g6 is what he played, again offering the c7 pawn, but I declined it for the same reasons and now took control of the g file with the rook g1. And he played knight h5 in order to stop rook g3, evicting his queen. And Fritz is screaming for me to take on c7 now, but I again declined because it was clear he would have good counterplay for the pawn. In order to be able to chase the queen away with bishop f1, I played knight d2 now, and I'd also noticed that there was a possibility of trapping his queen. After rook takes c7, by playing bishop f1, his only square for his queen would be h4, and then rook g4 would trap the queen. She would have no squares to go to. But playing rook takes c7 straight away to try and get that going, is definitely problematic. Let's have a look. If rook takes c7, best play goes bishop f6, knight d2, hoping for bishop f1 and the queen trap. But now bishop e5, and now I can't get rid of the queen with bishop f1 because of the mate threat on h1. So I'm forced into passivity with knight f1, and now he has, for example, knight h f4, and I don't want to lose the bishop pair. So bishop d1, but this allows him to challenge the c file with rook e c8 and say rook b7, maintaining my 7th rank rook, but now rook c4, and he's getting very active pieces for the sacrifice pawn and definitely has good compensation. It's looking dodgy for my king, and my pieces are tied to defense and lacking any kind of activity. What's more, any kind of inaccurate move and it would be game over. The pressure would really be on me, and understandably I wanted to avoid this, and that's why I played knight d2 when I had the chance. After he played knight h5, I played knight d2. And he carried on with bishop f6 with the same idea that we just saw, bishop e5, and this threat on h2. And of course taking on c7 now is bad for the same reasons. So I was more than happy to evict the queen now, despite its meaning he could defend c7 after bishop f1 with queen d7. So now, after making sure his attack wouldn't succeed, I now had to come up with a plan of my own. Doubling rooks on the g-file was of course one idea, and I wanted to strengthen my position as a whole. The first step towards that, I figured, was to reroute my knight, which is my most passive piece, to a better square. And black has a fairly serious light square weakness in the position as a whole. And in particular, c6 would be perfect for my knight, and also f5. And from d4, my knight would be very strong and could eye both of these squares. And the quickest way for me to get it there is via b3, where my queen is now, so I have to move her first. and of course it's best to do so with tempo, and I'm able to do that because of the pressure already on the c7 pawn with queen c2, and now it's attacked twice. Rook e7 is what Noel played to defend it, and it's the move that Fritz recommends. So now comes knight b3, but by moving to b3 it's left a protection of f3, so now knight h4 comes with tempo, and I don't want to defend it with bishop e2 because then the queen can come back to h3, so it's logical to defend it with my queen, and she's also tied to defending b2 from the bishop, so the correct move is queen e2, and from here she's also eyeing the loose knight on h5, making f4 a move that would come with tempo, which I liked, although at the same time the queen is on the same file as the rook here, so I have to be careful about tactics. And bishop e5 is what Noel played, which is a good square for the bishop, and I was slightly worried about him getting a knight to f4 with tempo against my queen, but figured I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. For now he has left h4 knight loose with his bishop moving from f6, so I can play rook g4 with tempo, and it also stops him using f4 for his pieces, on the next move, because he's only got 2 pieces aimed at it and I've got 2 defending it. And knight g6 is how he answers, so he's preparing to move a piece into f4 anyway. So now I get a knight d4, and I get my knight to a strong central square with the same ideas about moving to these powerful light squared outposts, as I was saying a second ago. And I was starting to like the prospects of my position, with doubled rooks on the g-file and bishop h3 looking promising, perhaps with the advance of the f3 pawn when it was safe to play. And I wasn't worried about knight hf4, which is what Noel played now, as this definitely gives me an advantage. And here he offered me a draw. He had about 15 minutes left and I had about 20, and I could see that I had big initiative coming, and perhaps he could too, and that's why he made the draw offer. A better move for him here, instead of knight hf4, was knight f6 with an equal position, in which I have to be careful about ideas like bishop takes d4, and after bishop takes d4 knight takes d5. My best bet here is to trade off rooks with knight c6, and after knight takes g4, knight takes e7 check, queen takes e7, f takes g4, which repairs the damage to my pawn structure but loses the bishop pair after bishop f4. Still, with bishop takes f4, knight takes f4, and queen e3, I retain a good edge with the initiative, a bishop against a knight, and better activity, although here a draw offer would be more reasonable, but I certainly wouldn't accept it. Anyway, I didn't accept his offer in the game continuation after his knight f4 move. And the reason I didn't is because queen d2, which I'd seen before he played knight f4, and he has no further way to defend the knight, and only one square in which he can move it, which is h5. And this allows me to play knight f5 with tempo because of the attack on the rook at e7. And he moved it to e8, and now I can get my bishop into the fray with bishop h3. And my position is starting to look a lot stronger and more active. I can double rooks on the g-file or play rook c6 to keep a firm grip on the position and make sure he has no counterplay by opening the queen side. My bishops are looking much stronger than his knights here, pretty much at the edge of the board, and my light square strategy is proving more important than his dark square one, which at the moment only amounts to his bishop on e5, as we're controlling f4 equally. Fritz says I have a big edge here, about plus 0.6, and with correct play and further strengthening of my pieces, combined with the timely advance of my central pawns with f4 and e5, it should be a winning attack. But what's really apparent in this position, especially if the board is flipped, is the pressure that I have him under, with all of my pieces at strong attacking squares, and this is something that he succumbed to immediately. Okay, that's the end of part 3.